slap you across your face, but it looks like God already beat me to it.
WWE has started removing some controversial moments from its library. It turns out there's a lot of stuff they don't want us to see anymore, from racial insensitivity to shocking violence. WWE's past is full of moments that wouldn't fly today. But which ones crossed the line, and why did WWE let them happen in the first place? In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the most controversial moments in WWE history. We'll see how these moments shaped wrestling entertainment and why they're being removed now. From the early days of racial insensitivity to the Wild Attitude Era and beyond, we'll cover it all. Get ready for a journey through WWE's most shocking and controversial moments. The early days when racial insensitivity went unchecked.
Try painting yourself half black. I painted myself half black one time in Toronto. Man, that was a dumbass thing. I'll just finish it with this story. I was walking down around the Hoosier Dome, and Pat Patterson and Vince McMahon and Bad News Brown was in there. And they said, "Could you come in for a second?" I said, "We want you to wrestle Bad News Brown." And then there was this pregnant silence of about 20 seconds.
Let's start our journey with one of the earliest and most infamous moments of racial insensitivity in WWE history. Back in 1990 at WrestleMania 6, Rowdy Piper shocked audiences when he appeared with half his body painted black for a match against Bad News Brown. This wasn't just any ordinary face paint. Piper had covered half his body in black paint, creating a stark contrast that was impossible to ignore. It was a moment that left many viewers uncomfortable, even back then. But why did WWE allow this to happen? To understand this, we need to look at the social context of the time. The late 1980s and early 1990s were a different era, where racial sensitivity wasn't as high on the agenda as it is today. Media, including wrestling, often reflected societal attitudes that were more permissive of racially insensitive portrayals. What we now recognize as clearly offensive was sometimes seen as edgy or provocative entertainment back then. Piper's blackface incident wasn't just a random act. It was part of a promotional tactic designed to hype up his match against Bad News Brown, who was African American. The idea was to create controversy and get people talking, and it worked, but not in the way WWE might have hoped. Fast forward to today, and this segment has been completely removed from WWE's current library. It's part of a broader effort by the company to censor controversial content from its past. This removal signifies a big shift in how WWE views its own history and the responsibility it has to its audience. But what does this mean for wrestling fans and for WWE itself? On one hand, it shows that WWE is willing to acknowledge past mistakes and take steps to address them. They're recognizing that some content, no matter how popular it might have been at the time, is no longer acceptable in today's world. On the other hand, some fans argue that removing these moments is like erasing history. They say it's important to keep these segments available as a reminder of how far we've come and to learn from past mistakes. It's worth noting that Piper himself later expressed regret over the incident. He admitted that he didn't fully grasp the implications of what he was doing at the time. This shows how awareness and understanding of racial issues have evolved, even among the wrestlers themselves. The Piper incident wasn't just a one-off moment, it set a precedent for future racial controversies in WWE. It highlighted how racial insensitivity could be overlooked or even encouraged in the name of entertainment. This opened the door for more racially charged storylines and characters in the years that followed. We'll see later in this video how this precedent played out in the Attitude Era and beyond. WWE continued to push boundaries with racial stereotypes and insensitive portrayals, often walking a fine line between edgy entertainment and outright offense. But the Piper incident stands out because it was so blatant and because it happened on such a big stage. WrestleMania is WWE's flagship event, watched by millions around the world. The fact that this moment made it to air at such a high-profile show demonstrates how different the standards were back then. A more introspective and measured Piper later reflected on the incident in a 2012 interview with Arda Okal of The Score. First of all, you know I was born in Saskatoon. There are no black people that I know of that are dumb enough to go to a place that cold laughs. So there's no racism in me at all, said Piper. At the time, I was walking down the hall of some arena. Maybe the Hoosier Dome. Someplace, I'm not sure. Vince McMahon says, "Hot Rod, I need to speak with you. I walked into a room and you could have cut the air with a knife. It was Bad News Brown, Pat Patterson, and Vince McMahon. I said, but what's going on?" He says, "I want you to wrestle Bad News Brown at WrestleMania 6. The Attitude Era, pushing boundaries and buttons. The Attitude Era changed everything for WWE. From 1997 to 2002, WWE pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable on TV. This era was all about shock value, edgy content, and pushing buttons. WWE wanted to grab viewers' attention and keep them hooked, no matter what it took. One of the most controversial moments from this time was when D-Generation X impersonated the Nation of Domination. DX was known for their outrageous antics, but this time they went too far. The members of DX dressed up in exaggerated costumes to mock their rivals. The problem? They used blackface as part of their impersonation. Sean X-Pac Waltman, who held off on publicly congratulating Mark Henry on his 2018 WWE Hall of Fame induction due to fear of blackface backlash, has since expressed regret for his part in what is widely viewed as a legendary sketch in WWE lore. "I wish I could say I was forced, but I mean, I protested. I've had people on both sides of that tell me, 'Oh no, it's okay. I'm going with them. I wish I hadn't done it almost.' You know, I mean, some people thought it was great and whatever, that's fine, but I just didn't know." He realized how offensive it was, especially looking back on it now. But at the time, the audience reaction was mixed. Some fans loved the shock value and thought it was hilarious. Others were uncomfortable with the racial insensitivity. Today, this segment is seen as a clear example of crossing the line. It's the kind of content that WWE is now trying to remove from its history. But back then, it was just another day in the Attitude Era. The goal was to get people talking, and they definitely succeeded, just not in the way they might have hoped. But DX's impersonation wasn't the only controversial moment from the Attitude Era. Remember the choppy your PP incident? This bizarre segment involved Val Venis being threatened by Kai and Tai. It was shocking, it was weird, and it definitely wouldn't fly on TV today.
It is, the whole Kai and Tai, Val Venis, choppy, the PP storyline off. I remember getting into the arena that night. They told me they were gonna, do the old chopping block thing, and I was like, "Are we really putting this on TV?" And they're like, "Yup," and I'm like, "Wow, I can't believe that." I had no issues with it at all. I just couldn't believe we were going to create it.
These moments show how WWE often chose shock value over good storytelling during this time. They wanted to grab headlines and keep viewers tuning in week after week, and it worked. The Attitude Era was hugely popular. Ratings were high, and fans couldn't get enough of the outrageous content. But looking back, we can see how problematic a lot of this material was. The racial stereotypes, the content, the violence, it all went way beyond what we'd consider acceptable now. WWE was pushing boundaries, but they were also reinforcing harmful stereotypes and normalizing offensive behavior.
Monday
So why did fans love it so much at the time? It's complicated. The late 90s and early 2000s were a different time culturally. What was considered edgy or provocative then is often seen as offensive now. Plus, the Attitude Era coincided with a cultural moment where shock value was embraced across different forms of entertainment. For many fans, the appeal was the feeling that anything could happen. WWE felt dangerous and unpredictable. Every week brought new surprises and jaw-dropping moments. It was exciting in a way that more family-friendly wrestling just wasn't. But that excitement came at a cost. The Attitude Era left a complicated legacy for WWE. On one hand, it was a period of massive success and popularity. Some of the company's biggest stars emerged during this time. On the other hand, it produced a lot of content that WWE now has to reckon with. Today, WWE is in a difficult position. They want to celebrate their history and tap into fans' nostalgia for the Attitude Era. But they also need to acknowledge that a lot of that content is problematic by today's standards. It's a balancing act between honoring their past and being responsible in the present. The Attitude Era shows us how much wrestling and society in general has changed. What was once seen as edgy entertainment is now recognized as offensive and harmful. It's a reminder that what's acceptable in pop culture can shift dramatically over time. Shock value versus storytelling, the ECW Influence. While WWE was pushing boundaries during the Attitude Era, another wrestling promotion was taking things even further. Extreme Championship Wrestling, or ECW, became known for its hardcore matches and shocking content. ECW had a big impact on how wrestling approached controversial moments. One of the most infamous incidents in ECW history happened in 1996. During an angle between Raven and the Sandman, Raven's flock crucified Sandman on a wooden cross with barbed wire wrapped around his head. The crowd went silent as they witnessed this shocking scene unfold. It was a moment that crossed a line for many fans and wrestlers alike.
When I came back, I knew I needed to come back with some sort of impact. And I thought, man, why don't I crucify the Sandman? That'd be great. You know, I've always said Raven's a martyr for society's dysfunction. And so I was like, so now I'll make Sandman feel how I feel as I'll make him a martyr for society's dysfunction now, and let him feel my pain.
Kurt Angle, who would later become a WWE superstar, was at the event that night. He was so disturbed by what he saw that he reportedly refused to sign with ECW. Angle felt the crucifixion angle went too far and was disrespectful to his religious beliefs. This reaction from a respected athlete showed just how controversial the moment was, even within the wrestling community. The Sandman crucifixion incident sparked a lot of debate about where the line should be drawn in wrestling. Some fans defended it as edgy storytelling that fit ECW's extreme style. Others felt it was gratuitous shock value that didn't add anything to the storyline. This debate highlighted the fine line between effective storytelling and going too far, just for the sake of controversy. ECW's influence spread to other promotions, including WWE. During the Attitude Era, WWE started incorporating more extreme elements into their shows. They introduced hardcore matches, more adult themes, and edgier storylines. While they never went quite as far as ECW, the influence was clear. The Sandman incident and others like it in ECW pushed WWE to reconsider how they approached shocking content. On one hand, they wanted to capture some of that edgy appeal that made ECW popular with hardcore fans. On the other hand, they had to be careful not to alienate their broader audience or upset their sponsors. This led to WWE walking a fine line with their content. They would push boundaries with storylines and matches, but usually stop short of the most extreme elements seen in ECW. For example, WWE introduced more violent matches like Hell in a Cell, but they rarely featured the kind of bloodshed that was common in ECW. The influence of ECW and incidents like the Sandman crucifixion can still be seen in wrestling today. One fan wrote, "Raven crucifying Sandman was the coolest thing I ever saw on those old VHS pirated tapes. Damn." Promotions continue to struggle with balancing shocking moments and good storytelling. They want to create memorable moments that get people talking, but they also need to avoid crossing lines that could offend viewers or sponsors. This balance is even more challenging in today's social media age. Controversial moments can spread quickly online, leading to backlash from fans and mainstream media. Wrestling promotions have to be more careful than ever about what they put on screen. Looking back at moments like the Sandman crucifixion, it's clear that they had a lasting impact on wrestling. They forced promotions to think more carefully about the content they produce and the messages they send. While shocking moments can create buzz and excitement, they can also backfire if they go too far. The PG era, a shift in tone and content. In the late 2000s, WWE started shifting gears. They were moving away from the edgy content of the Attitude Era and heading towards more family-friendly programming. This change marked the beginning of what fans now call the PG era. WWE made this transition for a few reasons. They wanted to appeal to a wider audience, including younger viewers and families. They also faced pressure from sponsors and TV networks to tone down the violence and content. It was a big change from the anything goes attitude of the previous era. But even with this new focus on PG content, WWE still had moments that pushed the boundaries. One of the most talked about incidents happened on January 9th, 2006. Edge and Lita celebrated Edge's WWE Championship win with what was billed as a live celebration in the middle of the ring.
Here we go. I think he's gonna take his boots off. I would be very nervous right now. I'm nervous sitting over here. I wonder if, I guarantee you, this you watch it now. Oh my goodness. Anything we've ever seen here on Raw. I got a feeling. Oh.
Now, you might be thinking, how did that fit into the PG era? Well, it didn't really. This segment was actually from the tail end of the Attitude Era, just before WWE made the full switch to PG content. But it's a perfect example of the kind of edgy material WWE was moving away from. The segment didn't actually show any explicit content, but it was still pretty shocking for TV. Edge and Lita were under the covers in a bed set up in the ring, implying they were having sex. It was the kind of thing that got people talking, but also the kind of thing that WWE wouldn't do once they fully embraced the PG era. During the PG era, WWE handled controversial moments differently. They tried to find ways to create excitement and drama without relying on explicit content or violence. For example, instead of blood, they used camera angles and acting to make injuries seem more severe. They also focused more on in-ring action and less on shocking storylines. But this new approach didn't sit well with all fans. Some people loved the change. Parents felt more comfortable letting their kids watch WWE, and some fans appreciated the focus on wrestling rather than shock value. But others felt like WWE had lost its edge. They missed the unpredictable nature of the Attitude Era and felt the PG era was too tame. This shift in content had a big impact on WWE's popularity. On one hand, it opened up new opportunities. WWE was able to secure more mainstream sponsorships and partnerships. They also saw growth in their younger audience. But on the other hand, they lost some of their older fans who preferred the edgier content. WWE tried to balance these competing interests. They would occasionally have moments that pushed the boundaries of PG, but nothing like what we saw in the Attitude Era. For example, they might have a storyline with mild undertones or a match with a bit more violence than usual. But these moments were carefully controlled and much tamer than what came before. One interesting thing about the PG era is how it changed the way wrestlers worked. They had to find new ways to tell stories and create drama without relying on shock value or explicit content. This led to some creative storytelling and in-ring work. Wrestlers focused more on their characters and the psychology of their matches. The PG era also saw WWE putting more emphasis on their female wrestlers as athletes rather than symbols. While there were still problematic moments, this period marked the beginning of a shift towards treating women's wrestling more seriously. As time went on, WWE found ways to incorporate some edgier content while still maintaining their PG rating. They would push the boundaries here and there, but always pulled back before going too far. It was a delicate balance between keeping their core audience excited and not alienating their new, broader viewership. Behind the scenes, the decision-making process. Ever wonder who decides what makes it to air on WWE programming? It turns out there's a whole process behind the scenes that determines what content we see and what gets censored. Let's take a look at how WWE makes these important decisions. At the center of it all is Vince McMahon. As the chairman and CEO of WWE, Vince has the final say on pretty much everything that happens in the company. He's known for being very hands-on with creative decisions, often rewriting scripts at the last minute or changing plans on the fly. When it comes to controversial content, Vince's opinion carries a lot of weight. One fan wrote, "You realize how messed up Vince is when you stop and think about how many times or was involved in a storyline." But Vince isn't the only one involved in these decisions. There's a whole team of executives and producers who weigh in on what should or shouldn't make it to air. This includes people like Kevin Dunn, the executive producer and chief of global television distribution. Dunn has been with WWE for decades and plays a big role in shaping the overall presentation of WWE programming. The creative team also has input on content decisions. They're the ones coming up with storylines and character arcs, but their ideas still have to get approved by higher-ups before making it to TV. It's a collaborative process, but at the end of the day, Vince and other top executives have the final say. One of the biggest challenges WWE faces is balancing creative freedom with corporate responsibility. On one hand, they want to give their performers and writers the freedom to come up with exciting, edgy content that will get fans talking. But on the other hand, they have to be mindful of their brand image and avoid anything anything that could potentially offend viewers or sponsors. This balancing act has become even trickier in recent years. WWE is now a publicly traded company with shareholders to answer to. They also have important partnerships with networks like USA and Fox, as well as streaming platforms like Peacock. These external partners have a say in what kind of content they're comfortable airing. Sponsors play a big role too. WWE relies on advertising revenue, so they have to be careful not to do anything that might scare away potential sponsors. This is one of the main reasons why WWE switched to PG programming in 2008. They wanted to attract more family-friendly advertisers and expand their audience. Network standards and practices also come into play. Each network has its own rules about what can and can't be shown on TV. WWE has to work within these guidelines when producing their shows. This is why you might see different levels of edgy content on different WWE programs. A show on the USA Network might be able to get away with more than a show on Fox, for example. But it's not just about avoiding controversy. WWE also has to think about what will resonate with their audience. They use a lot of data and analytics to figure out what fans are responding to. If a certain type of content or character is getting a good reaction, they're more likely to push it. If something isn't working, it might get cut or changed. Social media has made this process even more complicated. Fans can now react to things in real time, and their opinions can spread quickly online. WWE has to be ready to adapt if something they put on air gets a negative reaction. We've seen them make quick changes to storylines or edit content after it airs in response to fan backlash. The fan perspective: nostalgia versus progress. WWE fans have some strong opinions about the company's controversial past. It's a hot topic that gets people talking, especially when it comes to how WWE handles its own history. Some fans want to preserve everything, warts and all, while others think it's time to move on from the problematic stuff. Let's talk about nostalgia first. A lot of fans grew up watching WWE during the Attitude Era, or even earlier. They remember those shocking moments fondly, even if they know some of it wasn't exactly politically correct. For these fans, censoring or removing old content feels like erasing their childhood memories. One fan put it this way: "Let me sum it up most of this. The Attitude Era was controversial, LOL. But that was the idea. It was intentional, and it saved the WWE. Would not fly today, though." On the other side, we have fans who think WWE should clean up its act. They argue that keeping offensive content around sends the wrong message, especially to younger viewers. These fans are more concerned with making wrestling inclusive and welcoming to everyone. The debate gets really heated when WWE starts removing content from its library. Some fans see this as necessary progress, while others cry censorship. It's a tough balance to strike. WWE wants to keep its longtime fans happy, while also attracting new viewers who might be turned off by outdated attitudes. Fan reactions to controversial moments have definitely changed over time. Back in the day, a lot of fans cheered for edgy content that pushed boundaries. Now, social media lights up with criticism if WWE crosses a line. It's not just about being offensive either. Fans are quick to call out lazy storytelling or recycled ideas too. This shift in fan attitudes has had a big impact on WWE's current product. The company is much more careful about what they put on screen now. They're trying to create exciting content without relying on the shock value tactics of the past. It's a tricky line to walk, and not all fans are happy with the results. The rise of streaming platforms has made this debate even more complicated. With WWE Network and now Peacock, fans have access to decades of content at their fingertips. But what should be included in that library? Should everything be available, or should some things stay in the vault? WWE has tried to find a middle ground by using content warnings for some older material. This way, fans can still watch if they choose, but they're aware that it might contain outdated or offensive content. It's not a perfect solution, but it's an attempt to address both sides of the debate. Fan reactions to controversial moments have become a big part of the wrestling experience. Social media has given viewers a powerful voice, and WWE pays attention to what people are saying online. This has led to some positive changes, like more diverse representation and better storylines for women wrestlers. But it's also created new challenges. WWE has to be ready to pivot quickly if something doesn't land well with fans. Sometimes they make changes on the fly, editing content for later airings or dropping storylines that get negative reactions. Lessons learned, wrestling's evolution. So what have we learned from this wild ride through WWE's controversial past? It turns out wrestling has come a long way. Those shocking moments that used to get cheers now get called out pretty quick. WWE's had to change with the times, cleaning up their act while still trying to keep things exciting. It's not always easy, but it's part of growing up as a company. These controversial moments didn't just shape WWE, they changed how we think about entertainment. What's okay to show on TV? Where's the line between edgy and offensive? These are questions WWE's still figuring out. As fans, it's worth thinking about what we watch and why we like it. Wrestling's always changing, just like society. Who knows what it'll look like in another 20 years?